Making someone laugh is a good way to get their defenses down so that they then might be open to new ideas. Comedy has always been an amazing tool for social change. So says Mae Martin, a Canadian comedian, actor, screenwriter, and recording artist known for their ability to tackle complex topics with humor and insight. So just how powerful can this tool of comedy really be? Stay tuned and find out. In this episode of Shall We Check It Out, I'm joined by Pola Hempowicz, a former channel manager at Comedy Central Poland, a regular juror at the International Emmys and the Asian Academy Creative Awards, and a fellow member at the International Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Pola and I will be discussing La Médiatrice, a Canadian short-form comedy that picked up an International Emmy as the best short-form series produced outside the United States. The series follows Catherine, a star mediator who helps couples separate with care. But when she discovers that her own husband is cheating on her, showing care suddenly becomes not that easy. So Catherine finds a way to cope. She starts avenging her clients that she believes were wronged by their exes in the process of separation. I'm very fortunate to have Pola help me crack open the humor and cultural punch of the show, as she has held several comedy and short-form series panels at the World Television Festival in New York. Hello, Pola. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, Aistė. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
La Médiatrice. The series, whose English title is The Mediator, went up for an International Emmy with 3 other short-form series in the category. And those series were a documentary anthology on the artistry and athleticism behind competitive dance, an Argentine short-form reality and lifestyle show about physical transformation of community spaces, and one more Canadian comedy. So that's quite a diverse lineup, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in your view, what qualities of the Mediator set it apart and led to its win?
Well, as you know, the short form category is kind of like a Wild West in the International Emmy competition, because you end up judging genres that have very often nothing to do with each other. In this particular edition, last year, we had 2 comedies. So that was, I think, a unique situation. But there are years where we have very compelling dramas. We have documentary series that, have you on the edge of the seat. You have, as in this year, we have a reality television, we have arts programming. And the only thing that these productions have in common is the duration, is the format. And all nominees, no matter the year, to me are a masterclass in efficiency and precision in storytelling. You don't have, this 22 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour to tell a story, build up the character. You have to be very economic with your storytelling and building a relationship with the audience. The Mediator is fantastic. I would call it dramedy. It's a piece of content that did not lose its soul. It's very precise in how we get to know the main character and how we are taking on this journey through a personal crisis that is told with sharp and very often laugh out loud laughter. And I think what set it apart is the quality of the storytelling. And also, from my perspective, I think it's very timely, because we get to see this, maybe not hypocrisy, but this kind of a conflict of teaching something and then being forced to implement your lessons into your own personal experience, which is very hard to do. So I think this is all coming together and delivering a very high quality series, and therefore winning an Emmy for Best Short Form Series.
What's interesting, yes, on the one hand, it's so much easier said than done, right? So this saying, this idiom really is very well depicted and dissected in the series. But also, there's another thing that I think in episode 1, when Catherine, the main protagonist, goes to her editor or a publisher, and they discuss her book, okay? And she says, like, I want to write about separation with care. And the editor says, oh, but no. Nobody wants to read about separation. Everybody wants to read about love. We want to learn about love. But Catherine keeps insisting, no, separation with care, separation with care. And then once her own husband starts cheating on her, it turns out that care without love is very difficult to accomplish. So I think she learns something about herself and relationship. Maybe she's not such an expert as she pretends to be.
Well, listen, I spend a lot of time on social media. Now I don't know, became a heavier user of TikTok than I ever thought I will be. But there are these ongoing dramas with influencers who are exposed or who are confronted that they've been teaching their audiences or build their audiences and following on certain message, and then when they got put in a position where you have to use your own teaching in your own life, like Catherine, it's not as easy, and it's the facades collapses. And in a case of The Mediator, separation with care was big of a challenge, to say the least, and it wasn't as loving and caring as maybe the protagonist thought it could be in theory.
What do you think from the audience point of view? Because I think for creators it's a slippery slope, because yes, on the one hand, you can kind of make fun and tease this influencer who cannot follow her own teaching. But on the other hand, by doing that, you are risking to kind of look down on your audience too. Because if your audience follow influencers or admire influencers, and then if you tease influencers, then that's maybe a big risk of losing a big portion of the audience. So that's that would be my concern if I were a commissioner. Did you feel like the series was a little bit highbrow or a little bit arrogant?
No, actually, I thought there was this truth to it. And that's what connected me to the series the most. And I've watched all 4 nominees, and each of them compelled me in a different way. But The Mediator, I just felt that the story was very realistic. And the reaction of the main character, I feel like I could see myself in her behavior if I were put in this situation. So I didn't feel in any way misled or patronized or not connected to the storyline. So I would say that's actually, from my perspective, the strength of the series, that we get through this journey. And you don't lose the following or the trust of the followers to the people that they build those pedestal for. I feel like this is a very human story and human reactions. Sometimes she crosses the line quite intensely, and maybe she's balancing on illegalities of certain behaviors. But I think it's also a bit charming because we expect our therapists to have this perfect lives. We expect our influencers or our celebrities to have these perfect lives and always do the right things. But not a single human being is perfect, and we have breakdowns and we cross lines, and it's life. For me, it was lovely to see it represented that way.
Yeah, I agree. And also what you said made me think about this duality of certain professions. Because as you said, we expect our professors to be perfect. We expect our therapists, influencers to be perfect. But we also have to, and maybe this is what the series kind of exposes or teaches, for the lack of a better word, is that there's work. and there's our life, and sometimes it's not always very easy to reconcile the two. And then life happens and interferes, and then you do your best to get through it. And the best thing you can do is to learn from life and then feed that back into your work. So I think that was the humanizing of the idols. It was done very well, I think, and very cleverly. Also, another thing, you said it was a dramedy in your perspective, because in as far as international Emmys go, in short form category, they do not discriminate between genres. So it's not really important how pure the genre is. This is a Canadian series and a French Canadian series. There's a very popular opinion saying that humor is very culturally specific, and it doesn't really travel that well because each culture understands humor and communicates humor in a slightly different way. Do you think La Médiatrice, because it was streamed on a Canadian streaming platform, do you think it would do well outside of Canada?
I think absolutely. I think it's not a particularly French-Canadian story. I think we have a marriage in crisis. I think we have a professional woman who is trying to lead her perfect life in as best as she can. And maybe her focus on her career kind of blinded her to her own reality, put her into a bubble. And I think a lot of professional women around the world would resonate with that kind of message or that kind of story. And I think the humor in this particular situation, in this particular series, is more situational based. And that translates quite easily, actually, because those life situations are not so different, whether you're based in Korea, Poland, Sweden, or Brazil, or, of course, Canada. This is a very common thing, and it's not language based, which sometimes gets lost in translation. So I feel this is a perfectly designed comedy or humor to travel.
You as a juror for International Emmys, and also as a TV executive, you worked for Comedy Central Poland for many years. In both of those capacities, you had to watch and evaluate many comedies on a regular basis. So I don't know how many hours per month, maybe you can tell us. But in this, avalanche of comedy, what qualities made a comedy really stand out for you?
So I've been evaluating submissions for the International Emmys since 2018. That was the time where I was with Comedy Central Poland, so that was a perfect match. And ever since then, I am regularly judging comedies, both for the Emmy Academy, but also for Asian Academy Creative Awards, and just in general for international competitions. For me, it's an interesting observation of how the industry evolves and how prestiged television has become very obsessed with darkness, with trauma, with heavy dramas. And because this competition is so fierce on the drama side, very often there are submissions for the comedy categories. There are more dramas, there are comedies, and they're packaged as dramedies, but very often it's just a very heavy story that wouldn't stand a chance to compete against Game of Thrones or Succession. But there are some light scenes with some humor in it, so it can be packaged and put into a comedy. And I'm a comedy purist, so I've been advocating for making the rules a bit more stricter when it comes to allowing content into competing against other comedies, because comedy is the hardest piece of content to produce. And we now ask ourselves the question when we judge, has this been created to elicit laughter? Because if something was made to make people laugh, then it's a comedy. I don't have numbers for you how much content I go through each month or how many competitions I'm a part of. But what makes a comedy truly stand out is the specificity of characters and storylines. And you said it yourself just a minute ago that humor don't always travel But if it's done the right way, it will travel because it will connect. It will build communities. It will build this relationship with audiences. And there's a certain craft to a comedy. It's not just a bunch of jokes put together. There has to be a structural surprise. There has to be a very often character-driven stakes. I like to use Ted Lasso as an example, although some might argue that this is also a dramedy because there are moments where we cry, not from laughter, but from sadness of the situation. But I think that's also part of the tragi-comical side of life. I think that good comedy is something that will make you laugh. And that's the metric and the question. If something was good, it's going to be difficult to answer for other genres. But for comedy, it's a very easy one. Did it make you laugh? And if it did, then it's a good comedy. It's a quality comedy.
But if more than one comedy made you laugh, so how do you choose a better one? Because you do have to still, make a choice as a juror.
But you know that we pay attention to not just the humor, but it's also the production value, how something was executed, not just the concept or idea. We also see how it was developed, what actors, what casting have been chosen for the story. Did it connect? Again, there are not just English language comedies, of course. The Mediator, as an example, is a French. So if I were judging this particular category, I would ask myself, okay, this is in French. I don't speak French. Did I still get it? Did it still make me laugh? So, you take these things into consideration and then you score it, and then scores, the numbers speak for themselves.
One interesting thing that you said, when we judge comedies and when people evaluate those programs, they also pay attention to production value and production quality. And that's maybe one of the biggest differences from the internet content, which is funny. And sometimes people just think that having a joke, even if a joke is successful, is enough. So there's a lot of relatively funny content that is very poorly produced on the internet. And that's, I think, some of the misconception among young creators or certain kind of creators, that comedy doesn't require as much skill from the production side as drama, for example. Comedy can be cheaper or whatever. So I think it's important, from what I hear you say, it doesn't require less skill. You still have to be a skillful producer to make a comedy.
It's just like everything inside me is boiling now. What, are you trying to kill me? I said, this type of talk I will not tolerate. Please stop this immediately. I have to gather my thoughts. What do you mean? No, comedy is it's the hardest thing to ever be made, because it requires sensitivity, intelligence, empathy. Even Ricky Gervais, who's offending pretty much everybody, said that if there's no empathy, there's no comedy. You have to have a very human or understanding of a human behavior and human nature. You have to be very observant. Yes, you can slip on a banana peel to elicit this primal laughter, or you can do like pranks, which I'm not a fan of. Unless they're very intelligently made, because pranks are usually preying on other people's pain or fear, and that's not empathy. That's not in good spirit. That's more hurtful. You might think of roast as well, and roast originally were just Rat Packs and Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin getting together at the Friars Club, just being the best buddies and making fun of each other, but it was all in good spirit. It then evolved to far more offensive and hard-hitting punches at each other's, very often amongst people that know of each other but don't have personal relationships. If you analyze different roasts from Comedy Central, you can see how they've evolved. I think they've tried bring it back when they were doing a roast of Bruce Willis, where they said, okay, let's bring it more back and let's actually celebrate our honorary guests and let's do it in a good spirit. But the latest roast on Netflix, it lost all its beauty of a bunch of good friends joking about each other because they know each other so well and they love each other deeply, so they allow each other to throw these punches. But in the creation of comedy, you can do a low budget. You don't need to have a lot of money to make very funny and silly things. I think Sarah Cooper exploded during the pandemics when she was lip syncing to Donald Trump's updates about COVID. And she was doing it so brilliantly that ended up with her getting a Netflix special. And this is a low cost. This is a low effort. She was just naturally funny. But it was making people laugh. And it was coming from a pure place, not from the hurtful place. And so I think that in order to be successful in comedy, whether you are independent storyteller, content creator on TikTok, Instagram, social media, YouTube, whatever, you truly need to have a lot of love in your heart to other people and have to have this capacity for all different complicated feelings to turn it into laughter, to turn grief into laughter, to turn complexities of, I don't know, geopolitical climate into laughter in a smart, non-offensive way. So I think that making a good comedy is the most challenging and difficult thing in our creative industry, 100%.
Also, you mentioned, for example, Ted Lasso. So if you look from the production point of view at Ted Lasso, it is very difficult to make that show well, because there's so many scenes with many people, there's so much movement, there's a football pitch involved, and there's really, I mean, the logistics and the production side of that show is very complicated. It seems like this very light-hearted show, but production-wise, it requires a lot of skill to make a show like that. Also, I really love what you're saying about the roasts, because I'm not a fan of the genre the way it is now, and I just recently listened to an interview with Gina Yashir, who wrote Bob Hart's episode, and a very well-known and successful stand-up comedian. She also said, kind of seconds your sentiment, saying that the way Netflix is going about roast now is just an exercise in meanness. There's no camaraderie, there's no love. It's just like people being mean to each other, and sometimes even people that do not know each other that well, people that just invited to get more views, more clicks. They do not really necessarily know the main protagonist of the evening. So that's become a kind of problematic genre in itself, I think.
Yeah, and I think that what was surprising to a lot of people was that it seemed like a lot of roast materials in the latest roast was written not by the people who were saying these things. They were written by the writers or producers of the show. So it was either to generate outrage, but there was no personal connection to those said words. So that kind of undermines the entire purpose of roast in general. So that was very surprising.
Exactly. And Gina's main concern was, she was talking about Kevin Hart's roast, I think. And there was a lot of white people saying jokes about Kevin's skin color that usually only black people say to each other, and only black people that know each other very well sometimes can say to each other. And she thought that was like, really, it didn't sound funny, it sounded inappropriate.
Oh, so, I think there could be a separate episode of your podcast on that particular Kevin Hart roast, because it was so deeply problematic on many different aspects. So, the racism was definitely one of them. But the whole thing is just very artificially designed piece of entertainment, which is serving certain purpose, I think, because a lot of people have been talking about it. It caused a lot of outrage. I'm pretty sure a lot of people sign up for Netflix to watch it and to see what the fuss was all about. I don't think it's sustainable for Netflix to do these type of events, one-offs to elicit outrage or anger or the reaction, because it's not going to translate into long-term subscription. So it will generate or increase churn at some point.
There's now a big rise in comedy as tool for social change, or comedy as a social commentary. And it almost became like a must in the genre if you want to be like high-profile comedy. But I sometimes think, is it a must? Isn't just making people laugh enough in itself?
I don't think it's either or. I think we can have both, and I think both are equally needed. I think shows like Last Week Tonight with John Oliver is a great example of how you can use intelligent laughter to educate people and to make them more aware, but also to bring them together. Jon Stewart was also phenomenal at this when he was the main host of The Daily Show. Trevor Noah was also quite good. Now this year we have SNL in the UK, and that's the catalyst for dealing with what is going on politically and economically in the UK. So I think they will find a way to filter this through the format of SNL, and we will always need someone to help us digest what is going on and hopefully find our tribe of people. I think that also is a danger because it creates bubbles. And with the algorithms online, you always stay in your bubble. So you always kept surrounded by the same ideas and the same people. And you should be exposed to a different point of view at least once in a while. But at the same time, we need sitcoms. We need light entertainment. We need comedies. Dramedies as well. I'm not completely against dramedies. My only beef with dramedies is that they're trying to hijack a comedy category. I feel like we're getting to the point where we should actually have a dramedy category for the main awards to give a chance to not so heavy dramas and also not pure comedies. But they do serve a certain purpose. So they do make us laugh and they help us get through the day. They lighten up the mood. And it's a relief valve to your overstimulated brain. And they are both, I would say, equally needed, but they serve different purpose.
So I think from our conversation so far, it's very obvious that you have thought about comedy a lot and you have devoted a lot of your life to the genres. It's not always an obvious choice for a woman like yourself who is a high-level executive and who has aspires to a great international career. So what drew you to the genre of comedy? Why comedy, Pola?
Well, for me, the draw to comedy is so deeply personal. When I was a kid, my family went through horrific trauma and just the absolute darkness when I was 5 years old. And so I stepped into this role of a family clown and a joker. And it was not because I was funny, but it was just necessary. The only way for my family to go through and survive what happened to us was by laughing, was by watching comedies. It was by just having this brief moment of taking a deep breath in and processing these heavy emotions. And from that moment, comedy just became sacred to me. Humor is my lifeline, my compass, and my purpose. And I have so much love to all the comedy creators who deliver this escape and this survival to people who so desperately need it, that it's natural that I dedicated my life to protecting and celebrating, advocating, and spreading the gospel of joy and of comedy. And when I was the head of Comedy Central in Poland in 2019, we had a parliamentary elections. And there were many different aspects to doing different social campaigns to encourage people to go and vote. And I've decided to go back to what I love about comedy the most, that it brings people together and it just brings the best in us. And so we've created this social campaign encouraging people to vote in this most unifying way possible, because we were just appealing to people's sense of duty and togetherness and solidarity. And our campaign not only resulted in 2,000% of ROI, but we also were so effective in reaching people's hearts and their sense of duty that our campaign was one of the reasons why this was the highest voter turnout in Polish history since 1989. And that just shows you again in real life application that comedy is this beautiful tool to bring people together and to even make change, to change the history. And on the other hand, I've developed this travel documentary series called Love, Laughter, and Truth. And this goes into exploration of how our culture and our language shape our sense of humor and kind of design us what we find funny. And it's a journey through this human connection that it's built by laughter and by humor. And I was able to sell an option to this show last year, which just goes to validate and prove that there is an actual demand for these human stories. And I think that these milestones, these steps, just validate my relationship with this genre, because my entire life was put on a certain trajectory, whether I wanted it or not. But it got me to points where I can really either launch stand-up comedians' careers in Poland or tell stories that needs to be told, but most importantly, give this escape to people who really need it, empathize with them, and be this kind of a voice of change using comedy as a tool. So I love comedy more than anything else, maybe except for my cat, but I will not let you speak any bad word about comedy.
The last question that I ask all my guests, because the podcast series is called Shall We Check It Out? And the question is, from your point of view, should we check out The Mediator?
We should absolutely check out The Mediator. And also I would recommend to check out other short form series that were either previously nominated or won the Emmy. Mediator, if you're in the mood for light entertainment that doesn't come from a very light situation, comes from a personal crisis, I think it can resonate. So it's not just this mindless entertainment, it can really resonate with people. So absolutely, we should check it out.
Okay, thank you very much for being with me here today and discussing all things comedy.
Thank you so much, Aistė. Thank you. It was a pleasure, and I'm really grateful for having me.